What's up? How are you?
Hey, I'm well. I'm well.
Well, I really
Enjoying
appreciate
this
you.
hot day.
Yeah, it is super, super hot. So it's really interesting. You talk about the heat. Earlier, I had a conversation with one of my friends, and he had just been down in Florida, or still has family in Florida. It's like 80 degrees down there and 100 degrees up here. So
Wow,
yeah.
that is wild.
Yeah. But I really want to thank you for taking the time to hop on here and have this conversation with me. Um, so we're gonna just hop right in. Welcome back, everyone. I got a very special guest tonight. I'm gonna let her introduce herself and get right into her story. So, Tiff, if you could take it away.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Castro. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings, everyone. My name is Tiffany DeBellott, and I'm coming to you from Asheville, North Carolina. I am the executive director of the Center for Participatory Change, aka CPC.
Hey,
Woo-hoo.
hey, hey, hey.
And fun fact, CPC turns 25 this year. So for
Mm,
25 years, the Center for Participatory Change has been doing movement work in Western North Carolina and beyond.
that's powerful.
So, all about me.
Yeah,
Well, who
I'll
is
take us
Tiffany?
back to the beginning.
Well, I was born January 15th. And as a little girl, because I shared a birthday with Dr. Martin Luther King, I always felt and knew that I had a dream that
Mm,
was built in me. Um, and this dream required leadership development and just leadership decisions that I just organically morphed into since I was young. But I've been in Asheville for maybe about 30 years now.
okay,
I moved from Saluda, South Carolina, but
okay,
I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. And
okay.
that's where it all began. Me running around the concrete jungle in New York and
Hey.
trying to find myself as a little Black girl.
Mhm.
Yeah, especially heavily melanated.
Right.
So during the late 70s, early 80s, and we all know before and even now, colorism is a thing,
Mhm.
especially in our families. And growing up in a Black family with both my parents, we received, to me, like the both of best worlds.
Okay.
So one part was like my mom giving us the truth of history, America's dirty little secret
Hmm.
of chattel slavery, and my dad gave us the common sense that how you have to navigate and operate within this white man's world.
Hmm.
So it just infused in us this sort of Black pride, Black solidarity, Black power mindset as a
Okay.
kid. Uh, I would say one of the best times of my life was a big decision that my mom had to make, which was to decide to either let us go to the local elementary school or local
Hmm.
public school or go to bus us out. And we had that opportunity, and she chose to bus us out. And
Okay.
from then, in that moment, in that time, we were, this was the first time in my life where I was a minority. So
Mm.
growing up in New York, I never felt like a minority. We were the majority
Right.
in my neighborhood, in the borough of Brooklyn and Queens. So we rarely saw white individuals unless we went to Manhattan.
Okay.
So this particular school was in the neighborhood, and actually Trump, the current person who is sitting in the wrong seat, owned one of the buildings that was near my elementary school because we
Hmm.
had a lot of Russians that lived in that area. But it opened my eyes to a different cultural perspective.
Hmm.
And from that moment, there was this level of confidence that I knew I wanted to lead.
Okay.
And I began to lead myself within the context of acting. So
Hmm.
some of you may not know, but those who do know me know that I am an actress. So I've done some off Broadway
Why five offs?
because it was not on
Gotcha,
Broadway,
gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
but it was a small part. I did some extra work and as an extra, so like non-speaking roles,
Hmm.
but acting in general just took me to another place where I
Okay.
could become someone different. I embodied something
Hmm.
else.
Okay.
Uh, but I never became an actress. And fast forward, just growing up, as a young child, we're faced with decisions that we have to make. And your parents, your family, they can pour into you. The village can pour into you.
Right.
But, a child knows best. And so once I became a teenager, I just thought I knew and had all the answers. And so my defiance caused me to grow up too fast, too quick, and too soon, which is a form of trauma to the brain, right? Anything that is experienced too quick, too fast, too soon leaves a negative impact, which tends to kind of outpour later on in life. And I begin to see that. So all the things that I didn't want to be, I became. So, I look at my life as a testimony, but I also look at it as a roadmap. Right. So it's a roadmap for me now, for my daughters, and then for individuals who I come across too in life.
Right.
And, just being a teenage mom and all the pieces of addiction and seeing my family have love, but not a healthy love. So it was a toxic love that even though we weren't harmed in a physical sense, we were harmed emotionally or the lack thereof. And so those things played out in how I parented and mothered. So it took me a really long time to even get to this place where I am now, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I say that because thinking about all the things that I've experienced in life, and it's way too much. I need to just put it in a book. But seeing where I was at in that time, not realizing that I was the light in the dark tunnel, that there wasn't just light at the end of that tunnel. I was the light.
Right.
So I had to begin to do things different, not according to what my peers did, what my parents did, or anyone who looked like me or who I admired, because my stinking thinking had me admiring the wrong people who produced the wrong results.
Right.
So it took me some years to wake up.
I wanna
Years.
I wanna stop you right there and dig a little bit deeper to something that you said. Also, like I appreciate you opening up and walking us down memory lane with you. And one of the things that I heard you say was that your parents were carrying their own trauma, and then you experienced some trauma as well, both at home and in the community that you grew up in. What role do you think the trauma had in you becoming who you are today?
That's a great question. What role? So that the piece of, I got to be strong. I have to be resilient. But in fact, I have to be strong and I have to be resilient, or I will drown out here in this world. And I feel like the trauma that I experienced fortified me for that. But for all the things that came my way, I was able to be shielded from the trauma.
Right.
And I know that sounds crazy, but my father's overprotection, because he was intoxicated, that was a form of trauma there. It's like, you can't do this, you got to come home a certain time. That was his way of protecting us, especially as a teenager.
Right.
But I still found a way to get around that. And it's like, yeah, there's some shame in some of the trauma that I've experienced, especially to the fact that most of it is self-causing, right? Self-inflicting pain. But it made me strong and resilient, but also optimistic.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, I've been here before.
Right.
Maybe not just like this, but I've been here before. And what happened? Or remember that time, Tiff, when it was so terrible and you thought you wouldn't get over it, and look where you are. So.
Right. I think you bring up a really good point. And what I'm hearing you say was that in spite of whatever trauma you faced, the reaction that came from within was never one of defeat, but one of optimism and of resilience. And honestly, like the reality is we can't be resilient without some kind of trauma or obstacle in front of us, right? So I
So
find that
true.
really interesting that in spite of what you went through, and I also want to go back to something else that you said about the emotional trauma, because it's really easy to talk about physical trauma, but it seems like in today's society, and today's society is getting better about talking about different forms of trauma, but the one that I don't really hear people talking about the most is emotional trauma. And you and I both know that emotional hurt is just as real, if not longer lasting than physical hurt. You know what I mean? Because the bruise is gonna
Right.
go away in like a week or two.
Mm.
Hell, you might forget what caused the bruise before the bruise is
Okay.
gone. But the emotional trauma, the emotional scars tend, in my experience, to stay with individuals a whole lot longer. So how do you think you were able to hold on to optimism? And I'm an optimist, period. Like
Hmm.
100% an optimist. And it probably has a lot to do with the leadership that I've had in my life, because I've had some really good leaders in spite of the fact that I made bad choices at different stages in my life. But I had really good leaders. And no matter how bad the situation was that I faced in the past, like I'm still here. So that
That's right.
alone helps me be optimistic. How do you think you were able to hold on to optimism in spite of all the trauma that you were facing?
Mm. That's a great question. Before I touch on that, I'd like to go back because you
Okay.
said something profound that the synapses fired off. You said emotional trauma lasts longer.
Hmm.
And then I heard my spirit say emotional trauma is pervasive, like
Mm,
racism. So sometimes it doesn't even ever go away.
mm,
It's like you really got to dig deep to uproot it.
right.
Um, so how did I stay optimistic during some hard times? I'm just going to drop some heavy hitter names. You might know some
Okay.
of them,
Okay.
but some of them are long gone. But what got me through a lot of stuff, and the first book that I read that changed my life was Back to Eden by Dr. Jethro Kloss.
Okay.
And what inspired me, not only the fact that he spoke about herbs as true medicine and
Hmm.
just broke down how the body and the gut is the reason why we experience in all types of health issues that we go through.
Hmm.
Um, but he spoke against like pharmaceuticals, like big pharma that
Hmm.
exists today. And I don't know why that made me like it gave me hope, right? That
Hmm.
the world isn't just black and white,
Right.
that the world has color and the world there's a neutrality in all of that. Like all of
Hmm.
this mess, there's that piece of hope that exists in a neutral space.
Hmm.
And like I read that book so many times
Hmm.
and it really just got me through to begin to change the way I eat, which changed
Hmm.
the way I thought, which brought
Hmm.
on nonstop positive energy. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, so it was Back to Eden, Dr. Jethro Claus. But then I think, I was tested. I don't know how much of my business I should put out there, but
As much as you want. Like, listen, you can say whatever you want here.
but as I begin to transform and think freely, like not
Hmm.
thinking under the program mind,
Hmm.
and that truly does come from when you eat you know, a living diet that's more living than dead.
Right.
I started to have these mental situations pop off.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking, oh, wow, I am chosen by God. I really did. I was
Okay.
like, ooh, no, this might be some mental health stuff happening. So at the time I was in college and
Hmm.
I didn't know anything about mental health,
Right.
schizophrenia, just the DSM-5, none of it until my mom was diagnosed and I started to see her downward spiral in her mental
Mm.
illness. That's when I used it as a way of research
Right.
for my undergrad. And I was like learning so much how schizophrenia is hereditary.
Hmm.
It is more prevalent in women than men,
Mm.
and it's passed down from women. And you'll usually see the beginning pieces of it in your mid to late 30s.
Interesting.
And it could be all types of things from the hearing of I don't want to say the voices, but you're connected, right? Your kinetic energy is connected to energies that
Hmm.
exist among us, and
Hmm.
so now you're turned on to a different frequency.
Mm-hmm.
and they call it schizophrenia in different ways. But I had to fight through that because
Mm-hmm.
I started to feel it, and I thought that, me being such a spiritual person, because I was really spiritual at the time,
Right.
when I was younger, and just in the Holiness Pentecostal church, and just really connected to my ancestors and the shoulders that we stood on. I was
Mm-hmm.
in deep, but
Yeah.
I was in too deep because I wasn't doing the necessary self-care that's needed to keep
Mm-hmm.
a healthy spiritual balance. So I
Gotcha.
fell off balance spiritually, and I got
Mm-hmm.
caught out there, and I thought my life was over.
Damn.
But I just ran physically, like literally, I ran out of my house, and
Yeah.
like this breakdown happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it came from reading this book called The Hierarchy.
Okay.
And it was just talking about the inner workings of the Masonic temple
Mm-hmm.
and the correlation to King Solomon's temple and the
Mm-hmm.
whole order of the Masons and the
Right.
initiation. And the fact that King Solomon and Hiram Abiff. So just all of this historical knowledge and
Mm-hmm.
information I was taking in, but I wasn't eating. I
Right.
wasn't sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like heavy into it, that the physiological components of
Mm-hmm.
myself started to unravel.
Interesting.
And I needed help, and I didn't even know it. So I physically ran out the house, ran to the
Yeah.
school, ran and got my kids. I said, "Give me my kids." Oh my goodness. They were like acting really strange. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so when I hear individuals, and my heart goes out to mental health uh, persons that's suffering in silence,
Right.
and that's suffering, from these changes in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
I believe them. Like
Yeah.
that stuff is happening,
Yeah.
but you have to find a balance. And
Right.
once, once that trauma hit,
Mm-hmm.
it immediately ignited me to become aware. So instead of operating on autopilot, I was
Mm-hmm.
more in the now.
Right.
And I've never experienced what I was experiencing in the now, in that time, at that time.
Right.
So long story short, I really didn't know what to do. I went to the church, and just nothing helped.
Yeah.
So, and mind you, my daughters were with me, and they also experienced the outcomes and the reactions of individuals around me being different.
Yeah.
And I'm walking with a Bible and a tree branch. And the spirit told me, yes, the spirit told me you need something natural and you need the word of God. So just
Right.
go. And I made it to a place where I was loved, because that's what I heard. The energy say, you need to go where you are most loved. And
Right.
it's my childhood home in Brooklyn, New York. So I went to Brooklyn because at the time we were living upstate,
Yeah.
and it was on and popping from there.
Mm.
First, I wanted to do the right thing, right? So these strange experiences, maybe I should go to the doctor.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You
So I
thought, yeah, maybe
did.
I should go to the doctor. Yeah, I got you.
I might need to get this a little checked out. Um, and the first thing the doctor wanted to prescribe me, I believe it was Xanax.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure. It was some type of it wasn't like an over-the-counter thing. It was
Right.
a psychotropic drug that was gonna
Right.
now alter my entire being.
Right.
And so I got extremely scared, and I said, "Thank you, doctor, but there's nothing that I'm going through that God can't fix."
Right.
And then I never went back or inquired. I just started to pray, and um, I love bookstores. So every time I
Mm-hmm.
would go into a bookstore, I would just connect with the books. And I'm like, whatever book that I need right now, I know you're going to come to me, because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what I was looking for, because I didn't know what I
Right.
was up against.
Right.
So the book that came out to me was called Psychic Defenses.
Okay.
The first thing that I forgot the author's name, but the first thing that he said was, whenever you're going through any type of spiritual unbalance, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's unraveling into the physical world or realm,
Mm-hmm.
eat. Make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you have a full stomach. Make sure you eat. Make sure you get sleep. Don't, deprive yourself of sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
then he said, make sure you go and live in the physical world.
Right.
So he was like, go get, well, that's what I said to myself. Okay, I'm gonna go get my nails done. But he
Mm-hmm.
was like, go shopping, go to a spa, get a massage, like do the things of the world that connects you back to global society.
Right.
And I was like, okay. And when I did that, things just started to lighten, like
Interesting.
lift. But, I also had to implement because I met Queen of Fool at that time.
Hmm.
And Queen of Fool started to teach me breath work.
Hmm.
So doing the breath work, and I was like, oh wow, I see, like, for myself, I was able to see the results of being able to do fire breaths
Right.
and the like anxiety going away.
Hmm.
And so I feel so blessed now because it's like a lot of the stuff outside of any chemical imbalance, a lot of the stuff is because of the way we think, and that's the
Hmm.
quiet chatter that runs. And I call it a form of internalized racism too, because there's some shame, there's some hate in there.
Hmm.
And then there's that stuff that was dumped on us from like through epigenetics, right? So
Hmm.
what our ancestors experienced, that same teaching passed down to us today. And
Right.
so once I started to do that and implement all of those different things, I landed on having like mantras and positive affirmations
Yeah.
that I would sing, and then I would put it to a nursery rhyme tune. And the
Hmm.
nursery rhyme tune made my subconscious mind pick it up quicker,
Mm.
because I'll take like twinkle, twinkle, little star. And I'm like, I am a winner. Am I? No, that's not it. I'm not gonna give all those
No, I
secrets out,
got you.
but
I got what you're
you know what
saying.
I mean.
And honestly, like you said a whole lot that I want to unpack little by little because okay, so going back, like we're gonna try to go way back. Um, you said something about the gut being out of balance, right? And based on what I've read and the just the stuff that I've because I'll go down rabbit holes. Like I love to read, I love to learn.
As you
So
should.
right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you love to read too. We talk about books all the time. But one of the things that I read was that 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So if the microbacteria, I think they're called flora or something, that live in the gut
Mm-hmm.
aren't nourished properly, it's going to throw everything else off in our bodies and in our minds because we know that we can't necessarily separate body from mind, right? So one thing that I want to give you some props for saying is that you started doing something different. So I'm a person like I believe what I believe and I live my life the way I live my life. I don't try to push what I believe or how I live on anybody else. But the reality is alcohol is poison. Drugs are poison, right? When somebody consumes alcohol, especially if you consume a lot of alcohol, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't drink. If you want to drink, drink. I don't care. It ain't got nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
But when people drink, like I used to drink, when I drank a lot, what was happening inside of my body is that alcohol was killing the gut inside of the
Mm-hmm.
bacteria that's inside of my gut that's supposed to regulate everything, right? I like to think about it like
Mm-hmm.
you have a vehicle, and unless you drive an electric vehicle, your vehicle has an exhaust. If your exhaust isn't functioning properly, sooner or later it's going to cause issues in the engine, and the engine isn't going to be able to run the way that it's supposed to. So if if an individual is consuming too much alcohol, it'll start ruining the exhaust. So then the engine
Mm-hmm.
is not going to run the way that it's supposed to. So that's the first thing. The second thing is sleep. If an individual, and mind you, I don't get a lot of sleep. Like ever since I came home from Iraq, if I
Mm-hmm.
get 4 hours of sleep, like I've count myself lucky and blessed. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is our brains consume so much of the energy that we get out of the food that we eat that we need to take a break. It needs to shut off or at least kind of using the car analogy still kind of just idle and not be running full force. And a lot of people who are dealing with stuff being off or out of balance in their bodies don't realize that they have the power to do something about it in their own hands. Like eat clean, get some rest, get some sleep. And another thing that you said was after you read that or in that book, the gentleman was talking about getting into the physical world and doing something to make yourself feel better in the physical world. So you talked about getting your nails done. When
Mm-hmm.
you get your nails done, it lifts your spirits a little bit. That's a form of self-care that
Mm-hmm.
empowers you. And we know that when your energy is high, when you are vibrating at a higher frequency, then things are better, right? Whereas people that constantly find themselves dealing with negativity, they can't hold on to happiness, because happiness is a choice at the end of the day.
That's right.
It
Mhm.
Regardless of what the situation or the circumstances around you are, you get to decide how you respond to the situation or the circumstances, just like you chose
Yeah.
optimism instead of bitterness in the face of your trauma, right? And
Mhm.
I always like to go back to what you said, the mindset that we have. It's almost like wearing shades. The mindset is the filter through which we see the world. So if my mindset is positive, then it really don't matter what is going on over here. The stuff that's going to be
That
attracted
part.
to me, you know what I'm saying? The stuff that's going to be attracted to me is going to be positive. Now, that's not saying I'm not going to have challenges, because if I want to
Mhm.
grow, the only way we grow is through discomfort, right? So think about
Mhm.
working out. You literally put yourself through discomfort to break down your body so your body can rebuild it better. So, I mean, you said a lot right there. And
Mhm.
I really admire the depth of your perspective, because a lot of the people that watch the show feel stuck. They feel hopeless. And the reality is it's in your hands to do something
Mhm.
about. So like you said,
Mhm.
if you got if you feel out of whack or out of sorts or whatever, clean your diet, drink more water, get more rest, and then do something to make yourself feel good physically, and mentally will follow. Like there's been studies done about working out when you're stressed or anxious releases the chemicals or the endorphins that make you happy or make you feel pleasure, like serotonin and dopamine and all of this thing. But the reality is a lot of times people want results without effort, and that shit don't make no sense. You know what I mean? So how do you, with the wisdom that you've gained through your experience and the cumulative experience of the people who you've read or you've been in conversation with, how do you take that wisdom to the people that you serve, and how is it received, generally speaking?
How is it received?
Hmm.
Wow. So part of, and I don't want to go all the way back just to go forward, but part of my lessons in life came through religion. And I used to go to the Kingdom Hall
Okay.
as Jehovah
Okay.
Witness. And one of the parts and pieces in the Bible where Jesus was speaking of, like, you give the people what they need at the time in a way that is palatable.
Hmm.
So, right, you add a little bit of salt to it so that they can eat it,
Right.
or at least want to eat it, right?
Right.
So being gentle and being kind, having a welcoming spirit,
Hmm.
but then being direct and being real and transparent with individuals has has felt successful for me
Hmm.
to be able to share the gifts that I have,
Right.
especially when it's a hard gift to swallow.
Right.
Because, don't get me wrong, like I love the rainbows and the lilies in the field, and the world is perfect. But in reality, the world is not perfect. And
Right.
in reality, I'm not perfect.
Right.
So when individuals, if I'm bumping heads or, there's friction, just based on a message, then I realize that in this moment in time, that it's not for us to engage. So
Mm.
I'm not into force feeding individuals the truth. They'll come to the truth, and the truth will set them free when they're ready. Because there
Hmm.
was a time when I wasn't ready and I couldn't
Right.
receive it.
Right.
But now I am, and it's like I make those videos where I'm making my smoothies and I'm talking about ginger and,
Hmm.
cayenne pepper and different things like that. Or I'm juicing and I'm trying to show that. So sometimes also I don't physically tell people, I show them.
That's powerful. And I think one of the things that came up when you were saying that was not to cast your pearls amongst the swine, because they don't know that pearls are valuable. So they're going to trample over, they're going to eat it. They ain't no telling what they're going to do. You know what I mean? But they're
Mm,
definitely not going to appreciate it. And I think you're right. One of my mentors told me that when you're teaching or you're a leader, comprehension is on the instructor. So a good teacher or a good leader doesn't get frustrated when the individual doesn't understand. They find a way to tailor the message to that individual so they will understand. So that's what I'm hearing you
right.
say. And I mean, sadly, like a lot of people
That's
get a
it.
little upset if I don't understand things immediately, but it's okay. I think that just brings about, or it highlights like something that somebody's got to work on, right? Like I know if I'm in conversation with you and there's some kind of tension, there might be something that I'm missing. So like what I'm hearing you say is that you approach it with like curiosity and gentleness, maybe not as direct, because sometimes I could be too direct, and that's not sometimes that's not good. Is that correct?
That is correct. And you you okay, I hear what you're saying, as far as sometimes it's not good being direct,
No,
but
too
let the
direct.
spirit
Sometimes
decide
I'm
that.
too
Sometimes,
direct. Yeah.
oh, too direct.
Hmm.
Well, hey, you know what? There is nothing wrong with being a drill sergeant. We don't have enough of them out here. So you just keep doing that. I mean, I digress. No, my
Um,
dad was like a drill sergeant and my
mhm.
mom.
Oh
So
God.
it
Yeah.
like having people that are that are too direct really
Mhm.
fortified me and my brothers in a mighty way. And
Mhm.
that like that those lessons live in my
Mhm.
daughters and I see it now in my granddaughter.
That's what's up.
So we should honor strength because we don't see it enough.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I'm learning since I came home from prison is so I played sports, then I was in the military, then I was in prison. So gentleness isn't something that comes naturally to me or that came naturally to me. Like I'm having to learn it, especially if I'm leading somebody who hasn't been through those types of situations. I have to remember, I don't remember who it was that said, um, truth without compassion is cruelty. And I remember that because if I'm not compassionate when I'm telling you a difficult truth, then it can come across a little too blunt, maybe borderline rude. And I do my best to not be rude at all. But so
Watch
tell
it,
me,
watch it.
yeah, like I don't want no trouble. Like please don't hurt me. I don't want no trouble. So tell me a little bit about the work that you do at CPC and how your gifts and your experiences and your knowledge and your understanding plays a part and how you're successful integrating what you've learned into the work that you do now.
So thank you for that question.
Hmm.
CPC for me, CPC has been a part of my life and my organizing journey
Hmm.
for the last 10 years, I
Oh,
would
wow.
say, because I was a participant before I became a staff person.
Wow.
And it opened my eyes to like, oh, this is what racism looks like in the South.
Hmm.
North Carolina is one of the biggest states that did major organizing around the civil rights movement, around
Hmm.
the workers' unions movements in
Hmm.
North Carolina and Tennessee, but specifically here. And I was just like, okay, so this is how you fight the power. So you don't
Hmm.
necessarily fight the power by just complaining about the power.
Right.
You position yourself in places of leadership. And
Hmm.
so with CPC, I learned working just around Tammy Forte Logan and Tamiko Ambrose, like just learning and understanding how we have to implement strategy. And so
Hmm.
CPC is exactly what it stands for, right? Centering the voices of the individuals and the people so that they can participate, excuse me, in their own change.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
our mission is ignite, transform, heal. So
Hmm.
ignite collective power, transform systems of oppression, and heal in community.
Mm.
And for 25 years, CPC has done that in many ways, where a lot of organizations whose focus may have been on social justice,
Right.
similar to CPC, they did the work for the people, not necessarily with the people,
Hmm.
or have the people do it for themselves. And
Hmm.
so I just was able to see that as a young woman growing up within this organization.
Right.
So a lot of the work was just centered around grassroots organizing and grassroots capacity building.
Hmm.
Years ago, CPC would give micro grants to individual, like to small movements, so that they could seed themselves. So
Hmm.
they would seed themselves utilizing CPC's popular education model,
Hmm.
right? So now it's not this hierarchy voice of opinion getting to give all the decisions and make all the changes, but it's a collective.
Right.
And so CPC's work has always been around the collective power and how we build
Okay.
that from the ground up.
Interesting. No, I really like that. And it makes me think about a couple weeks ago, I had Christy Puckett on the show and from Forward Justice, and she was talking about, she brought up something pretty incredible. She said that because she's an activist in North Carolina as well, and does a lot of work, a lot of lobbying, a lot of work empowering individuals. And she said that there has to be a balance with taking care of the people who have experienced harm and advocating for change. Because in the way that she put it is like, regardless of what is done, like let's say like the system completely changed or all of the systems that oppress, because just to be clear, like racism is just one of the isms that do people wrong. There's also classism, there's sexism,
That's
there's
right.
a bunch of different things that do harm. So, and she brought up a good point. She said that in an ideal world, we can eradicate harm. But in the real world, there's always going to be some harm done because not all harm is intentionally done. So
Right.
there has to be a focus not only on addressing the harm and holding individuals accountable and seeking to correct the systems that contribute to an individual causing this harm, but also to have like a soft landing space for individuals who have experienced harm. And like that's what I'm hearing you say is like CPC educates individuals, tells them about the power that they have to make change and to make a better life for them and their community. And I feel like that work is really powerful. And I respect it because where I'm from, they're stuck in like the 50s. Like everything is really slow, everything is it's just a whole mess down there. And I wish there was more organizations and individuals educating people about what they can do for themselves instead of complaining. Because the reality is complaining don't do nothing but remind you of the harm, remind the people around you of the harm, and it sows bitterness and dissent instead of promoting healing. Because the reality is, if I know that I drove down this street and I hit a pothole, instead of me complaining about the pothole, if I'm more aware as I'm driving down this street, I can avoid the pothole. And then I can also speak to the Department of Transportation or Public Works or whoever and tell them about the pothole
That's
so they
what
can
I'm
fix the
talking
pothole. You
about.
know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's a both
Yes.
and. It ain't a either or, because a lot of times what I've experienced is that for real, a lot of time, and I appreciate that, but a lot of times what I've experienced is that you have the power to improve your quality of life.
That's
It's
right.
not on anybody else to do it for you. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I'm doing something that makes you uncomfortable or that annoys you or that you don't like, yeah, definitely call me out. But you also have the power to speak to me. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like I like the model that you guys use. That's like it's that handshake. Instead of just promoting complaining, like let's educate people on the power that they do have to promote their own well-being and the well-being of the
Solutions.
community. Right, right.
Mhm.
And then let's also address
Solutions
these
oriented.
systems that have been in place for hundreds of years. You know what I'm saying? Because
Mm.
I promise you, there's some people in there that know it's wrong and want it to be different too. They might just be scared to open their mouth. You know what I mean? So,
Can I can I
of
add to
course.
that?
Yeah.
So the reason why I jumped up and was like, yes, that's how you do it, is because um growing up in New York, people they really complain. Yeah,
Yeah.
New Yorkers know you complain a lot, but we
You
love
about to
you.
start some shit? Hey, I
But we
didn't
love
say it, New
you.
York. I didn't say it.
um, but so just looking at how these larger systems operate, which it still feels like it is back in the 50s.
Mhm.
So in the Black neighborhood, the bus just seemed like it was able to just drive right past us and didn't stop at the bus stop.
Mm,
And so we had to wait for another bus. Mind you, the bus was not fully empty. He
right,
just did not stop.
right.
I was so furious that I followed the protocol to put a complaint out,
Hmm.
getting the bus information as it drove by. And I really was charged and I wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really felt like empowered in a way of saying, well, they're not gonna listen to you, or they don't listen to Black people.
Mm-hmm.
The power I felt was, oh, they're gonna hear me. Even
Mm-hmm.
if they don't do nothing, they're
Right.
gonna hear me.
Right.
And it felt good. And I was like,
Right.
okay, that was one part. And then
Right.
another piece was in my neighborhood in Bed-Stuy on Fulton Street. I noticed that once you pass like the white neighborhood, the
Mm-hmm.
gentrified area, and you're like in the heart of Bed-Stuy and Fulton, there's
Mm-hmm.
no trees. There were
Mm.
no trees. So trees, the carbon dioxide filters our oxygen, and it gives us what we need. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of times why, and we did do the research,
Mm-hmm.
when there's not a lot of clean oxygen in your area, the morale of the people is low.
And that goes back to the
Yep.
hormones and the off balance that we were talking
Yes.
about before.
Yep. And so
Interesting.
we had a poetry cafe that was like right around the corner from our house. And I joined the Malcolm X grassroots movement. And it
Mm-hmm.
was just, just a bunch of college kids with a professor that
Mm-hmm.
really taught us about policy, advocacy, and change.
Mm-hmm.
And so we created like this presentation for New York City Council,
Mm-hmm.
and we went and we utilized all of our boroughs, the
Mm-hmm.
boroughs that supported the neighborhoods,
Yeah,
and we went and forced, implemented, created change to have plants planted on the
that's
on the
cool.
sidewalk.
That's cool.
And but you know what they said? We can't tear up the concrete. Well,
Yeah.
then put pots.
For planners, yeah.
People are gonna piss in them. We
So
don't
what?
care.
So what? So what?
And
People
in
gonna
that
piss on the
moment,
sidewalk.
but that was my first experience with true organizing and seeing it
Right,
all the way through.
right,
So yes, we do have the power. We just
right.
got to know how to use it.
That's it. That's it. And another thing to be conscious of, and like I say this because I've seen it historically, things in their excess become their opposite. So people that were once fighting for freedom end up becoming tyrants if they don't know when to stop. You know what I mean? So it's also like I always ask myself when I'm ready to open my mouth about something, some injustice being done, do I want to correct the injustice or do I want to punish the person doing the injustice? And maybe sometimes it's both, but maybe sometimes the individual that's doing the injustice ain't even got their eyes open. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people are just completely oblivious, and I'm not dismissing anyone. I say this to reference back the conversation that I had with Christy Puckett. It's a really powerful episode. I think you're gonna love it. She said she was a victim of domestic violence, right? She got locked up. Her story is amazing. Her full story is on the episode. But then when she became, she started working in the clinical space. The people that she had to work with were the perpetrators of domestic violence. And originally she was like, I don't want to work with them. Like I ain't got nothing to say to them. And then she said that the more she started learning the story that these people lived through, a lot of them were victims themselves. A lot of them didn't realize that what they were doing is wrong because
That's
they didn't
right.
know anything different. You know what I mean? And she said that
Mm,
after years of working with them, she was able to have some compassion and she got to open their eyes to see that what they were doing was just as wrong as what was done to them as children.
mm,
You know what I mean? So I feel like that's really powerful work. And I feel like the work that you're doing, especially something like that, like in a dense, smog covered metropolitan area to bring fresh air. Listen, after the storm, the way that the storm came through, Helene destroyed everything down here in Asheville and Hendersonville. Something about the apartment just don't smell the same. You know what I mean? So like FEMA came
mm.
out, they checked, the apartment complex came out, they checked, they said that everything was fine. But I started doing my research and I found that there's certain potted plants like spider plants that can purify the air. And ever
That's
since
right.
I got the plants inside my home, like it doesn't smell the same. It doesn't, it like the energy in the air in here feels cleaner. So like I really resonated with what you said about the studies that you found that when there's not access to fresh oxygen, morale is a little bit lessened. So like that's really powerful work. Um, so changing gears here,
Mhm.
I really appreciate your perspective and I appreciate the work that you're doing and I appreciate the fact that you educate people instead of just like like doubling down or helping them double down on complaining, because like you and I both know, complaining alone don't mean nothing. Like you can have passion, but you have to have the education and the vocabulary to get your point across.
That's right.
So based on the wisdom that you have, can you give the listeners and me 3 seeds of wisdom to go back to, like, if we find ourselves feeling stuck in certain situations?
Okay. So the first thing that I want to say is gratitude. That's the number one,
Powerful.
the biggest priority. Having gratitude will take you far, even when you don't realize that you need that support, or when you don't even
Mhm.
know what's going to be next. Gratitude will take you
Mhm.
there. And it's a
Powerful.
simple being grateful every day, even when it's hard.
Mm.
So I would say gratitude and walking with it. Um, Patience.
Okay.
I think patience, we sometimes overlook patience. And
Mhm.
for me, when I feel stagnated and stuck, it's because my mind is racing, and my mind and my heart is not in alignment right now.
Mm.
So I have to find a place to sit in silence and just connect with being patient. So you calm your nervous system down.
That's powerful.
So gratitude, patience, and this might seem silly, but fun/laughter.
I like that.
Sometimes when you're
I like that.
stuck, go in the bathroom and just bust out laughing for no reason, and laugh
Okay.
so hard
Uh-huh.
you will come out of there laughing at yourself like, this is so stupid.
You so silly.
And then your whole vibration changes.
I like that.
Um,
I like that.
so above all things, keep your heart as light as a feather.
That's so powerful. I think, man, listen, I really resonated with that. Especially I resonated with gratitude and the laughter part. The patience part took me a long time to learn, but now, listen, if it's out of my hands, I got the patience of a snail. You know what I'm saying?
That,
If it's out of my hands, if it's in my
yep.
hands, I'm gonna do it. If it's in my hands, it's getting done. If it's out of my
Mm-hmm.
hands, like, but it was a lot of headache and heartache to learn. If it's out of my hands, just let it be out of my hands. But there's something about, like, I don't take myself too seriously. You know what I mean? So I do my
Very
best to
good.
always be lighthearted. I do my best to I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes I find myself in some situations that it's a little hard to be lighthearted, but I do my best to do it anyway. Like, it's not that serious. At the end of the day, like, it's not about me. If somebody harms me or wrongs me, they had something going on that made them feel justified to do this to me or do this to anybody, right? So it's not necessary, and that's something that I think a lot of times we as human beings forget, because we have the natural inclination to take things personally, when the reality is it's not necessarily about us, it's about the story that that individual is telling themselves. So gratitude, patience, and laughter, that's so powerful. So how can the viewers and the listeners find you and some of the content? Because I know you be posting some content too. So I want to shout
Mm-hmm.
you out and
Mm-hmm.
send traffic to you as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, you can follow me on Facebook. My name is Tiffany Flunnery, and I'm new at this, so I don't really know how to give out my handle. So
Okay.
just
Well,
look me up, Tiffany Flunnery. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say we're gonna drop all your handles in the description also.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, you can follow me on Instagram at Tease Fanny, Facebook, Tiffany Flunnery, and on TikTok, Love is Light.
Well, everybody go give her a follow and subscribe. YouTube channel coming soon, right?
Right. Oh, and let me tell you all, I don't know if you're going to be in town this Saturday, but
Mhm,
CPC has partnered with Yale University, the
mhm,
campaign school at Yale University, and we're hosting a Pathways to Public Leadership. So if you
mhm.
want to get your feet wet around public speaking, or if you've ever thought about running for a nonpartisan role with your local city council, come down to Abipa Life Center, and you can find that information at www.cpcwnc.org.
I love that. Listen, instant commercial, instant commercial. I
Nah,
love it. So listen, I really appreciate you coming on here and telling your story and just talking
thank
about
you.
some really heavy topics, but you talked about it with so much compassion, love, and a lighthearted feel. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you this Saturday. You take care.
Thank you. And you too.